Welcome to SourceIT and Sourcing in the Digital Age. My name is Ola Chowning. I'm a partner and digital fellow with ISG, and I'm coming to you today to talk about engaging service providers in the culture of agility. So what is agility? Well, agility at the end of the day is really the ability to introduce velocity in how I conduct my work. And for quite some time, we've seen the three cogs of agility be an agile SDLC, the application of lean principles, and DevOps. And those three together certainly provide us with velocity. But there's a flywheel, and that flywheel is product alignment or product aligned delivery. If I basically take my capabilities within technology, if I view them from the consumption or the way in which they're consumed, if I align them to that consumption, what I have a tendency to do is to vastly increase my velocity as well as my flexibility. So the effect of agility actually becomes much larger when I apply product alignment. All of these practices, though, are enabled by culture. Culture is the real key to DevOps, to lean, to agile, and certainly to product alignment. And the intent of all of these practices is, again, to get the velocity that I need in order to respond to the market and to my customers in a rapid fashion. So culture is the unspoken. It's the way we behave. It's the attitudes, the customs, the beliefs as an enterprise that we sort of bring to the table. And so if we think about a common viewpoint on what are the most mature agile enterprises, they would commonly be very self-organized. They would be empowered. They would have decision authority much closer to where the decision making needed to be made. So if I think about smaller teams, particularly in a product aligned organization, those smaller teams would be empowered. They would have decision rights. They would have the authority to make decisions and to be able to conduct the work they need to conduct. It's one of the things that allows them the velocity, the speed that they really need to achieve. One of the other core tenets is collaboration. Really the intent here is that in order to achieve customer value, I need to have this highly collaborative atmosphere, and that collaboration happens not just with technologists, but also with business stakeholders. Potentially, it's with consumers themselves. If we get into this collaborative mode, then the true entrepreneurship that I'm trying to generate within these teams becomes apparent because we're all working toward the same goals. It also allows us a bit of risk tolerance. Everyone understands why the risk is being taken, and therefore it's far easier to actually stomach. Trust and safety and loyalty. Look, these are all important, and they really speak to the ability and the need to be safe, psychologically safe, to do this testing, to do this learning, to do this failure. To be able to fail within these environments is very important. And I have to have the trust and feel that psychological safety in order to really bring forth my creativity and allow me to test and allow me to learn and potentially fail in order to learn. There's usually open sharing both inside and outside the team. So within the team, I'm very incented to let everybody know what I'm doing, to listen to what everybody else is doing and be able to incorporate that within my team. But even beyond a singular team, what we see organizations really being able to take advantage of is the ability to learn and share beyond just a singular team, but look across the organization and see what other teams are doing. There's really an aspect of eye-level human engagement, and what this means is really speaking, acting, and collaborating eye to eye. There is no leader over you over them or them over you. Everyone is working at a very peer level. And this is really important. And again, it gets back to that psychological safety of being able to bring forth ideas and be able to admit that I don't know how to do something so that you can get the help of your team. We need people on these teams who are agile learners, who are open-minded to change, who are willing to get out and learn new things, who are willing to fail, willing to take the risk. We need that kind of worker in most of these agile environments. It's what enables the creativity and the innovation that I need in order to achieve the velocity that I'm trying to really generate with enterprise agility. And of course, I've got to take personal responsibility. I can't do this and just say, well, if it fails, it fails. I've also got to take personal responsibility that I'm still doing things in light of what the entire product or the entire capability needs to assume. So I'm not just doing things because it'd be really cool to do it. I'm doing it because it actually generates the value that I'm trying to generate from a business and a technology perspective. All of these things are cultural. They're all behavior oriented. They're not tools. I don't have some great new tool or new software that I can implement to be able to do these things. They're very, very cultural. And culture, again, is all about behavior. Well, how do I do that with a service provider? How do I get this highly trusted atmosphere, this collaborative atmosphere, when I'm trying to do things like empower my team and have customer centricity, where I'm trying to be focused on business value and I'm trying to be highly flexible and very fail first and fail fast sort of atmosphere, where I want people to be very accountable, but I need to have that level of efficiency. How much empowerment does my service provider need in order to sustain the velocity I'm expecting them to help me with in these new models? And what role do I play as a client with third parties in my environment and with those service providers in either enabling them to share in that culture or even to be able to just ensure that the right culture exists as I'm trying to work with them in this, again, very creative, very collaborative environment. Does that mean my service provider now interacts directly with my customer, potentially even with my consumer? How comfortable, do you need to be for that? What am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to stand between my business and my service provider? And do I need to continue to do that as I might have in the past? And how do I balance the need that they have as a service provider for some freedom and some open capability, the ability to have a higher level of risk, versus that level of oversight and accountability that I need to drive? Because as a service provider, they obviously have some other agenda items on their list than I might have on mine. So the first thing we need to do is recognize the level of agility that we need. Look, not everywhere within our organization do we need to have this highly agile, multiple deployments per day, per hour, maybe per minute. I don't need that everywhere within my organization. And recognizing that I have a sliding scale that says some of the capabilities within my organization need to be very agile. They need to be highly conducive to an environment where I'm going to have a lot of testing, a lot of maturing of capability. These are usually less mature business processes, or there might be less mature technology processes. I'm usually going to be in a vastly different architecture, a very modern architecture that's loosely coupled. I'm going to be using things like continuous delivery and continuous deployment, analytics-driven feedback. I don't wait for the consumer to tell me whether things went well. I'm really looking at the statistics, the data about how the consumers are utilizing that technology or that capability to inform me as quickly as possible what's actually happening. Are they clicking through on specific feature functionality? Are they looking at what I'm expecting them to look at? I'm usually using DevOps both in tooling, but also in staffing. I'm trying to get smaller cross-functional teams who are not just developing, they're also operating. And I need that combination of skill because I'm developing so quickly, I'm putting things into production so quickly that I need those same people to be able to operate. I'm building the plane while I'm flying it, to use an old analogy. I'm more interested in flexibility typically than I am efficiency. I'm far more about being able to go really fast, and I might be, okay with some degradation in my performance or maybe even in my quality in order to get the speed that I'm looking for to be able to respond to my consumer needs. On the complete opposite end of my sliding scale, I may be looking at capabilities that need to be very stable. These are usually areas where the business processes and or the technology is very mature. It doesn't change a lot. I may actually be using off-the-shelf or commodity capabilities. Software as a service is a big player in this. The way you do HR in one organization is very comparable to the way someone else does human resources. And so rather than creating a customized, bespoke way of doing human resources, we're leveraging solutions that are available in the marketplace. Look, at the very least, we're using converged platforms, and we're starting to really see how my ability to automate operations is also helping me ensure that I have highly efficient operations, and that what's happening as I create new capabilities on the agility side, it just drives itself to needing more and more efficiency on the stability side. And so recognizing that the level of agility that I need within my organization is not going to be the same, and that I don't need the same level of tooling or automation or culture or collaboration, that culture of collaboration, I may not need that everywhere within my organization. But where I do, and particularly where I have service providers within my environment, the first thing I need to do is demand the foundations. The foundations are all about automation and analytics. And those foundational elements really are something that are becoming table stakes for most service providers today. In fact, they often can't operate or can't operate as efficiently as they would like to without providing that level of automation and the level of automation that they need to within the environments. But I should certainly be demanding that, regardless of the environment, that I'm bringing that level of automation. But I've also got to incentivize their collaboration. I've got to incentivize them to modernize, to help me modernize my environment and modernize my culture. So I've got to create some incentives around it. I need automation and analytics within those operational layers. Again, it's table stakes. I need it to be everywhere. But I should be looking at continuous deployment automation only where it's needed. Cost me a little more. I need to have new tooling in place. I need a higher level of proficiency in those areas, but I don't need it everywhere. And I need to really only be looking at it where I really need it. I can incent movement to the cloud, and that cost variability, which is frankly a lot of what I'm looking for in the cloud along with the architecture, I can incentivize that movement to the cloud by working with my service provider, ensure that they recognize that's perhaps what I'm trying to do whether that's within a particular product area or broadly across my entire organization. Working with my service provider, make sure they understand my strategy, where I'm going, and then incentivize them to help me get there. I also need to be careful and mitigate potentially volume-driven cost increases in legacy environments. So look, we have some environments where when I start to draw down on the amount of volume and it becomes lower and lower, my price actually can go up per unit. And so I just need to be conscious of that, mitigate that risk as much as I can. And frankly, the best mitigation of that risk is to get the heck out of that environment as quickly as I can. So again, I'm trying to incentivize, let's get out of that environment and get to a cost variable state where I'm basically being charged based on consumption. We can also use things like risk reward models to motivate continuous innovation within the service providers, particularly if I'm using service providers in small product-oriented teams. My expectation is that they get more productive over time. That their velocity of throughput gets greater over time, that the number of people on their team gets lower over time as they learn and as they become more effective in how they collaborate. Another really good idea that we see organizations starting to finally recognize they need to do is embed your staff with the provider. Look, your provider really understands potentially some of these newer tools and newer capabilities and some ability to do some of these things. But on the flip side, they may not understand your business. They may not understand how your business utilizes a piece of technology or a capability. If you embed staff in the service provider space, then you get the learning on both sides. We get to improve the skills of the service provider in terms of the business, and we get to improve the skills of your own staff in terms of automation and skill sets and those sorts of things. It also helps to promote that culture that we're trying to embed within these teams of collaboration. I really do want these teams to start to feel, jointly accountable for things. And I want them to feel more like teams and not like it's us and them. We're really trying to get rid of that as much as we can within these environments. The second thing we need to really think about is changing the style of procurement. As organizations move from traditional plan, build, run sorts of operating models, and they move to more hybrid, agile delivery models, enterprise agility, and product-oriented delivery. Also, our particular style of procurement needs to reflect that. So where we used to procure largely based upon infrastructure and application build and application run, these separations of these things are becoming very cloudy. So where does infrastructure end and applications begin, particularly in a cloud native environment, becomes very fuzzy. It becomes fuzzy because we're moving into these environments where I'm directing infrastructure as code. And therefore, that gets very, very gray in the middle of it. So rather than thinking about project providers as being, this very beginning and end build function, and that's really all it's involved in, or that applications development is separated from applications maintenance and operate, or that IT infrastructure, indeed, on its own is holistic and it's everything within the infrastructure environment. Instead, what we're seeing is that I may have product teams that are more, think of them as integrators. They're integration teams. They may actually be doing, a variety of tasks. They may be doing operational tasks, development tasks. Think of them as traditional project tasks, new investments or new feature function that they need to perform. I may have technology providers that are really at the platform level, and they're providing me the operational platforms, maybe even up to the database or the operating system layers, upon which I may put other service providers who are doing maybe the application or the user interface layers. And so as we see organizations move from very traditional architectures and very traditional ways of delivering to newer ways of delivering, how we actually contract for those services also needs to change. I'll also, not lose this need to have potentially projects, particularly that go across multiple capabilities within my environment or multiple products within my environment. I've also got SaaS providers in my environment who are providing me full stack capabilities, maybe even all the way from the business process layer. So my organizations and how I'm procuring is getting just as complex as my architectures are as well. And I need to understand that and change my style of procurement to reflect the state of my architecture. And there's a couple of newer sourcing alternatives that we see emerging within the marketplace. Have been emerging for a while. We see them now starting to really proliferate. One is the idea of a DevOps pod. Now remember, DevOps is development and operations happening through a singular team. We're seeing a lot of service providers being far more amenable to this type of arrangement, and we're seeing a lot more clients who are needing this sort of arrangement because they have a high degree of continuous deployment and continuous integration that needs to occur. These are usually very capacity-oriented teams. Again, I'm looking for a specific level of operations alongside a specific level of development. And so I'm really needing to talk through what that consistent team members would mean within that environment, how I would see productivity happening in that environment. And it's usually enabling a full stack. So it's usually operating not just the application layer, but also operating the infrastructure layer to a great extent, particularly if I'm in a cloud native environment. I've got more predictable costs when I'm in these kinds of models. We've got a couple of nuances that come into play there. One of them is, what do I look like? What's my role as the client within these models? And we'll chat about that here shortly. Some of the considerations we need to think about is the co-location or the geography needs. If I truly need to be that collaborative, then I have to think about at least the time zones in which I can be collaborative. We've all learned with this day and age how to be virtual, but that virtuality also has to consider what are people's time zones, and can I do that in the same way that I could in the past. So they may not need to be co-located or sitting right with you physically, but they certainly need to be available in the same time zones that you're in. I should also be allowing for consistent and frequent priority shifts. And that's priority shifts both in what type of work is coming into that team, but also potentially the amount of work coming into that team. Look, we all learned through the COVID-19 pandemic that we needed to be not just agile from a scale up perspective, but we also needed to be very flexible from a scale down perspective. So we need these teams to be able to contemplate all levels of scaling, up and down, and be very collaborative in how they're working with us to either stop development at a particular time, switch completely to ops, take some of their people and move them to other teams. So this is probably the area where service providers and clients are struggling a bit, is that not only do I want to have this fully embedded, if you will, team that's conducting this work on behalf of my business, but they also need to be very, very flexible as well. The other alternative is an agile dev team. Now, this is truly development only. It's usually very much an application development being done in an agile model. They're usually consistent for a period of time or for a specific outcome that I'm looking for, perhaps potentially a release. It might be a release of a new upgrade to a particular software capability that I have. It might be new feature function that I need by a specific time. We see the agile model being contracted for those outcomes or for that specific period of time. So either through epics or stories or sometimes even down at the sprint level. It's about limiting the risk to a shorter period and faster deliverables. So it's about not just contracting an entire project, because typically at a project, I'm really contracting for the end result. I'm really just contracting for true capabilities that are available to my consumers far more quickly than it would be in a typical project mode. We do see T&M constructs. We need to be really careful about the level of resources that we have. Some organizations are starting to talk to their service providers about this ability to easily lever from an agile dev team to a DevOps team. This is when we see maybe the velocity of change going up, and I really need to shift my attention. The third thing I need to do is address retained roles, and this has a lot to do with this collaborative aspect. Organizations have discovered that if I have a DevOps team, and whether that DevOps team is co-located, onshore, nearshore, offshore, doesn't really matter. If they're a third-party team, and I have the business that needs to be highly collaborative with that team, it also benefits organizations if they have a technical product owner, a person who is within the technology organization who can ensure that the technological needs of that particular product or that particular capability is being adhered to, that we have the appropriate level of oversight. I usually have architects that are retained in today's sourcing environments. My product owner, of course, usually is on the business side. And usually I have a 3-in-the-box model with a DevOps team and a DevOps pod. I'll have a proxy technology product owner on the service provider side. I'll have the technology product owner on the IT side, and I'll have a product owner who's on the business side. In an agile dev team, I'll have a very similar construct. The difference here is that I may just have a Scrum Master who's actually working with the development team. And of course, all of my operational roles are retained, or maybe they're given to another third party who may be managing the maintenance and the operations of the applications that are under development. The fourth thing I need to do is make sure that I'm still governing my service provider. So look, even when I'm in this highly agile model and I have these agile teams, and they're particularly a DevOps team, and they're highly empowered, that doesn't mean that they're free to just do anything they want. They still need to comply with the performance requirements that I have for that particular product. The real key may be that those requirements are going to be per product and not going to be some general measurement. So I might still have SLAs, but those SLAs will be very, very tied to that specific product that I have that team engaged for. And so I'm going to look at things from a business perspective, a development and an operations perspective, and I'm going to jointly define the value that I'm expecting that entire team to obtain. And so that's going to be with the business, it's going to be with the third-party service provider, and of course it's going to be with the embedded IT team from the company. And I'm going to really look at governing and ensuring that everyone's participating in that environment. It's something that we see Agile teams and DevOps teams do quite often, is measure the culture and ensure that everyone on the team is participating. And that's really the key of the highly collaborative nature that we see, is that everyone shares in the participation, everyone shares in the outcomes. Look, clients and providers at the end of the day are using lots of different innovative ways in which to collaborate in these new environments. They're sharing in risk and rewards for continuous innovation. So certainly what your service provider learns in your environment, they're certainly going to take back home and use with their colleagues as well. If we incent cost variability and the rapid movement to the cloud, we can actually leverage their experience and their knowledge to be able to get us there. We should be demanding significant levels of automation and analytics within our environments, regardless of whether we're in DevOps models or if we're highly agile or we're more stable. Regardless across our environments, we should be demanding that. And service providers are certainly bringing that to the table without any problem. And then look, if we want to sustain agile development and have flexible demand and accelerate our development of new digital products, we've got to do this in collaboration with our service providers. They need to share in our culture. This is not about their culture. It's not about our culture. It's about the culture, and it's the culture of the team. And it's really what we need to do to help our service providers be able to share with us in this very collaborative, empowered atmosphere that we see in enterprise agility. I hope you enjoyed the discussion today and you enjoy the rest of the conference. Thanks so much.